One more time.
Calvo, alto y gordo. You like it?
What does it mean?
Without hair. Tall and fat.
How's that for someone who has a copy? And Stephen, did you test the Stephen yet? Well,
So our wonderful panel here is going to offer questions for us, and we're going to speak to them.
Perfect.
I'd like to ask how, in your coming together, teacher from the north, teacher from the south, how your work informs the others.
How we work? What?
How your work, how Stephen's work informs yours and yours informs Stephen.
Well, in certain way, he's working with the environment, fields, and we were working with the actors' points. It's totally complementary. The fields are going to give you a framework, but a framework in the way of a wholeness. And our tools are going to provide certain specific kind of behaviors in which you can move in the field, but not in the field we settled here, which is instrumental, but in the real field, which is the important place in which you need to behave. The real field is the field of all our daily life, I think.
And I think the question of how your work informs mine or mine might inform yours, the gift of you and your tradition informs my work entirely, in that what's important in your work that is also important in my work, and yet I learn from you and I learn from the Andean practices, is the imperative of opening to perception and separating perception from experience. Experience is an aggregate of our personal histories, our biographies, that influence and distort perception. And there's an imperative in my work to perceive very cleanly the fields that are aspects or expressions of your dominant field, the Kalsai Pacha, the world of living energy. And a moment ago you spoke to these fields being instrumental. Well, they are entirely instrumental in the context within which we work, and yet they are the same fields of our day-to-day lives. And if we can suspend all of our experience and open to these fields and be informed how best to proceed in any given moment, we're moving on. So the gift is brilliant of connecting with the world of living energies, being very grounded, and read these fields and fields of energy and perceive them and act on them. I mean, this work is like this.
I was seeing instrumental in the same way in which what we share with the people here is instrumental. It's just something which was settled before to show you how you can do it by yourself. And at the end, it's not important if you perform a good Samin Chakwi here or not. The important thing is if you are going to use the Samin Chakwi in the critical moment in which you need to face a challenge in your daily life. And in that way, the way in which we train you with the Andean techniques, spiritual techniques, is instrumental at the same level in which we are performing here fields. But participating in these fields, I think you are going to be aware to perceive the daily life field, which is the most important thing.
Perfect, perfect. In the same way that I often regard the constellation process that we use in here to remove impediments, that it too is metaphoric or instrumental in teaching us to use the same ability in our day-to-day lives to think of the world in fields, to perceive the fields, and to be informed and act. Whether the constellation reconciles anything or not, if one will open to this perception and move through their life as though they are moving through a constellation being formed by something beyond their experience, everything will work beautifully. Perfect.
A nice example. You perform a constellation here, and you need to honor something which is not so likable for you. But in the constellations, you need to bow to that. Okay? This is a training. Maybe in daily life you are going to find a source of energy which is not so likable for you, but you need to honor.
Absolutely.
To honor, to avoid a clash with that, or to be able to accept that, which is something which was rejected by you. And in that way, the work with the constellations are teaching me something about how I can handle what is equivalent to constellations in the Andean tradition.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Perhaps there's another question we could speak to.
Juan, coming from your Andean cosmology, and you're speaking of the fields and perceptions, what is important for us to know and to live in this culture?
Well, I think if we are carrying something valuable, is the conviction about how living energy is enormously abundant, and everyone can achieve the amount they need to have a plenty life. This is one thing. To have an abundant life, we can live in an abundance. This is, I think, probably the most important thing we are carrying here, because not only the United States, but almost all the Western world is immersed in something we can call the image of the limited good. Okay? According to that, good is something totally limited, and we behave as if, to say, God and the nature were two very mean beings, which give you good things just in little tiny drops. The Andeans discover how this is not true, how we are immersed in an abundance of life, and everyone can have an abundant life. Okay? This is one thing. The second thing I think is important is our idea of the Inca seed. As you know, the Inca was the emperor of the subcontinental empire in South America, the only society in the whole world history in which there were not hunger or poverty, because it was a redistributive, tangible state. But the quality of that state was marked by the ruler, who was the Inca. Okay? And today the Inca, when we were speaking about the returning back of the Inca, we are not speaking about the returning back of a specific person. We are speaking about the recovering of some specific level of consciousness, which is the level of consciousness of the enlightened. Apparently, the founder of the empire, Pachacuti Inca, was an enlightened person. Okay? And we talk about the existence of some Inca seed inside every other human being, which means you have inside yourself the potential to become an enlightened person. And how you are going to do that? Just making a connection between the abundance of light living energy around yourself with your potential, with your Inca seed. And then you are going to be the witness of somebody else growing inside yourself, who is going to be you, but better. Somebody who is going to transcend your actual personality. You, yourself, keeping your identity, but much refined and better. I think these are the two key points of what we can share with the Western tradition.
I think the points of abundance, I'll speak to that similarly in the process of constellations, that people come and set a constellation desiring to clear some impediment to so they can have a more expressive life or more of the experiences they want. And yet repeatedly the constellation reveals that even though somebody might be focused on the angst of an issue or the constraints or limits, the field continually offers and informs that the opposite or the flip side is right here. That although there might be great pain or suffering here, that joy is a facet of that suffering, and it simply requires one to shift their attention or their perception. And how that is done is simply by acknowledging what is real in their experience. And there's a shift where the love moves and joy is present. And it's consistent over and over again that what we perceive as or believe to be a limit, and therefore we have these experiences, the opposite, if you will, is right there. And we can shift. And this was really brought home very markedly to me a couple years ago when we were doing a constellation, and the field was informing, and part of the field was informing me specifically, and it was prefaced with this phrase, Stephen, wait, you're going to learn something here. And then Archangel Michael was in this field, and he was above the field. And he said, watch this, I want you to understand that all war is grace. That we think it's nothing but suffering, but war itself is grace. And in the process of the unfoldment of that constellation, that was demonstrated. And my understanding didn't catch up with that for 12 months, till I get it. Not only did I apprehend it, but I comprehend it. And so repeatedly, the conceptual reality that we live within is other than the actual reality here of support, of vitality, of abundance, of grace, of joy, of happiness. There is that reciprocal dance. If we open to consent to what is and take what's there, and over the course of the time, the imperative to acknowledge what is diminishing, where there's an invitation simply to shift and look at the fullness and the plenitude, the plethora that's here for us. Similarly, it's found again and again. Speaking of the seed within, that is the field itself. In my understanding, in my perceptions in the field is that aspect of ourselves that can grow and grow and grow, and that is the love, the light, the vitality. It expresses itself differently than the Andean tradition, but I believe they're one and the same. So, great.
How does it express itself differently in the Andean tradition?
Well, in certain way, we are a little attached with history in the Andean tradition. And a new level of consciousness is not something you are going to invent it. It's something you are going to just recover it, because it was here before. Was here before in a very specific person, Pachacuti the Inca. And of course the fifth level was in somebody else, and the fourth level was in somebody else. When you start to develop yourself, you are not creating anything, because we are in a very low level of consciousness today as a society. Probably we are developing the fourth level. But the Inca tradition has historically the fifth and the sixth level of consciousness. Okay? And it's about just recovering that. We are not creating anything. We are not inventing energy. We are attached with history. For us, the potential of a human being is the result of his own history, the history of his civilization, society, or anything. Well, for some reason, our teachers make this statement about how not only the Andeans have this Inca seed, but all the humans. And with Ivan, we were searching about that. And we found how they were right, because you can find the sixth level of consciousness in St. Francis of Assisi in the Western tradition. And you can find it in the Jewish tradition in Moses, and you can find it in the Eastern tradition in Buddha, and so, which means we are just trying to recapitulate nice ways of being who were before us in our civilizational story. And in that way, I think my masters were right, because it's not about inventing or creating anything. It's just a fact. Somebody of this level of consciousness stepped planet Earth, and when he did that, we are capable to just follow this direction to recover something which was here. And this is our heritage for the past.
You painted a picture this morning of the world with superpowers, and you spoke, Stephen, about this time being the age of the spirit of Shekinah, of the feminine. And so many people in the world feel they've come to the edge of everything they know and are really looking for what is next, or where to go or what to do. And do you feel in the feminine, this is one of the next steps, the edge we've come up to, which is what you talked about, Juan, this edge we're at, both personally in ourselves and in the world?
Well, I believe he is right about the Western society. The Western society really need to recover the compensation of the feminine side of the perspective of the world, okay? The Western civilization emphasized for too much time the value of the male side of the things, you know? And I'm convinced how there is nothing like we are equal, we are not. Women and men, we are not equal. This is just a fantasy, beautiful fantasy of our democratical aspirations. But we are different. I'm not saying this is superior or this is inferior, but we see the world from two different perspectives. Physically, we are different. To be male or female is the only factors who make an anatomical difference in humans. Anatomically, I'm closer to a Chinese than to my wife, of course. My anatomy is closer than the anatomy of a Chinese. And our identity, psychological identity, is related with the perception of our bodies in first instance, which means our psychology is built based on the perception of your physical body, okay? It makes our psychology different too. I'm not saying ours is better and yours are not, because I'm coming from the Andean tradition, which is probably, as far as I know, the only civilization who is capable to honor both sides. Well, the Tibetans, some of the Tibetan masters are attributing to the Andean tradition the condition of being female, okay? But in certain way, this is a projection. This is a projection of what another civilization needs to recover. Of course, we are totally related with the feminine thing, because Mother Earth is the equivalent of Viracocha, to say, the metaphysical God. The metaphysical God is compensated by a physical goddess, which is Earth. And for us, she is not a thing. She is not a planet. She is a being, a real being, a personal being, okay? But we are not only a female tradition. We handle both sides. But in the Western tradition, and this is something which was seen very early by Carl Jung, Western tradition need to recover the value of the female.
I want to speak to this a minute. I remember several years ago, I don't know, I must have been in Philadelphia or something, and I was asking somebody directions to a venue where I was going to work, and her response was, "You can't get there from here." And I have asked myself a lot, are there places one can't get to from here, wherever here is? And I think we're speaking to one. the work that I do in fields, and constellation is one format of that, is I hope and intend and involved in recovering something that is very much our nature, but it is not our human normalcy. And I want to recover something that is very natural to us, that has been a party to us all the time, however we've been estranged from it. And I think it is in the abstract, it is our wholeness. But we can't get there from here unless we go through the feminine, and for how we've configured our dance. And so the feminine is the route through, and in the movement through, what we've believed to be masculinity, I believe, is going to evolve and will move forward, where the masculine and feminine become one into this something that is very much a natural part of our human condition. However, it has not been normal in our experience, nor has it been normal in the kinds of perceptions we have. And our beauty, our future, our magnum opus, if you will, is before us. We've done brilliant things with the masculine at huge costs, and yet we're moving forward and into this period of the feminine, where everything's transformed, and our greatness is yet to be expressed. And there's a very natural wholeness, and I think it is love, and I think that there'll be an entirely new form of creativity that will issue from that. So there's an imperative in that the history of what's found in the Inca of the 6th level, that has always been a party to humanity. And I also believe that the 7th level is still here. We just have not had access to it. And so you draw on this as an energy, as an awareness that informs our local consciousness, and we move on. It's very touching, and it's very exciting. It just touches me deeply.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I need to apologize because in certain way I was speaking as an Andean, but I was born as a Westerner. And in the beginning, 30 years ago, in which I started to work with the masters of the Andean tradition, because I started to explore the spiritual Andean path 40 years ago. But 30 years ago, I meet the masters, the 4 masters with whom we developed what we are sharing now. And before of that, of course, the connection with the feminine was missing in me. I was speaking yesterday to all of you about how in some dramatical way I discovered how the existence of the feminineness. The existence, because until that moment I was just expressing the male prejudices about what a woman is or is not. Okay? The really knowledge of what is feminine and what is the meaning of a real woman is something which is not the beginning of the path. It's something very advanced in the path of development of yourself. In certain way, you were speaking in the same way in which Carl Jung described what he called the process of individuation. The first part of this process is to deal with your shadow. But in the measure in which you were not finished the process of dealing with your own shadow, you are not going even to discover the existence of the other side. Okay? And which is the symbolical limit of dealing totally with your shadow? It's the limit of the emergence of the sun, which means when you finish to work with your shadow, you have the same quality than the ruler of Egypt, a solar king or a moon queen. But to arrive to that, you need to start to deal with your shadow and process all your shadow, and after that, only after that, you are going to glow. And this is the moment as a sun or a moon, okay? This is one level. This is the moment in which you can start your work with the other side of the world. Okay? And this is the process which is related with animus and anima. Now there is the fashion of speaking about the nice feminine aspect which is in the men and the nice masculine aspect which are in the women. This is just kidding with the whole thing. Because I don't have a very nice princess inside myself. I have a totally untamed feminine being. And the same thing is in you. You don't have a nice prince inside yourself. You are a troglodyte there. This is the truth. And start to work with that is very hard. And to do that, I cannot do it by myself. I need a woman who tame this wild female being who's inside myself. And the women need somebody of the other gender, a male teacher who can tame the troglodyte which is inside yourself. This is the process. And to move and dealing to integrate these two sides is something totally new in a collective way. There were some individuals who did that in the past. But as a whole, as a group, as a social group, I think it's the first time in which we are even grasping this possibility.
Yeah, I think so. And I would imagine that psychologists or psychiatrists sit around, if they're so disposed, to have an argument whether the spiritual is an aspect of the psychological and vice versa. For me, there's a distinction that, and I would put Jung in the category of working very spiritually and psychologically, but I would make a distinction between aspects of his work that are spiritual and not psychological. And that's where the constellations come in that in my reality, the constellation is a spiritual process, not a psychological one. And one could say we're working with one's shadow. I don't think that's an accurate representation of what we're doing, but it doesn't really matter at one level what we speak to. But the constellation is involved in removing any impediments that open one to love, and that's loving self entirely, the masculine aspects, the feminine aspects, and reconciling oneself with others. So again, there's just a relationship here of in a complementary sense of what you bring to the table and what this process brings to the table, and what I bring to the table as well. So yeah, please.
Yes, I've often heard Juan speaking from a Jungian perspective or the psychological perspective, we'll say, and bringing his indigenous background and training with masters. And then you with the systemic background, and sometimes I see how there's a bumping up against each other's, belief systems. Can you speak to that about what you guys are wanting to do in the blending of these two different ways of perceiving, and how that might benefit those of us who bump up in our world with people who are different from us?
Well, I'll start that process in that in your tradition, this is a mesentine, in other words, an alliance of that which is similar. And in this process, what's gone on for me and with you at times is that sometimes we've had a lot of conflict where we bump up against each other. And I think in part it's part of me being not very gracious, me being impatient, me being selfish, me wanting to, at least for myself, think I know what I'm talking about and having it reflected here. And what I do is I get impatient about, well, there's maybe, what are we going to do to create space for my perception? I don't. So it's this self here who has conceptualized himself as being smaller than he is. It's forgetting to remember the Inca seed, or forgetting that the growth of the Inca seed takes some time. So we've had a lot of impatience and a lot of arguments. And the image that comes to my mind often has been two bull elk, where we've been clashing. And yet, I love this man, and he's my teacher, and you're my teacher, and I honor and respect you, and I value the gifts you've given me, and so, and I also feel loved by you, and I feel respected by you, and so there's the love present, but then there's the dynamic that oftentimes has been no damn fun, and yet we stay with it because the love is stronger, and we know that the Yanantine also takes the development of the relationship of the sameness. And so I also know that there's this other piece of bringing the Andean part and the constellation part, that something else is coming. And so there's enough passion for that sooner or later I'll grow up. I'll get tired of myself and I'll grow up and work more graciously.
Well, as you remember, Yanantine and Masintine have different levels. In a very basic level, we are in Masintine. We are males. And of course we behave as males, and sometimes we are challenging each other, struggling each other, and so. But love not always is this nice, beautiful thing defined by the romantic definition of love. If I really feel he is wrong, my loving way to relate with him is tell him, I think you were wrong, and challenge him. And if he loves me, the opposite thing is the right way to behave. Because if I believe, I can be totally wrong, of course. If I believe he is wrong, and I just shut my mouth, this is not being loving with him.
Not at all.
Because if he is wrong, he's going in the wrong direction. And if I can help him to change that, it's in a certain way my duty, because I love him, and vice versa. And not only we are impatient, both we are very impatient. We are trying all the time to make the plants grow, throwing the plants out of the ground sometimes. But Valerie is impatient with us too, because she saw us fighting all the time, and she's seeing the thing from her female perspective, which is not our perspective. Okay, we can deal better with these fights than you can imagine, and we are not going to become enemies. No, never. Okay. Well, the Yanantine Masintine overview is very beautiful. For example, with my wife, I have a basic Yanantine relationship because she's a woman and I am a man. This is the basic identity. But beyond that, for example, we are anthropologists, and this is a Masintine relationship. But beyond that, she was who teach me about the existence of the Jungian psychology. In that way, we are Yanantine again. And I think this is what is happening with us. In one level, we are Masis, in the next level, because of the constellations and the Andean techniques, we are Yana, because we are trying to make compatible two things which are basically different. If there's no difference there, we don't need to make this meeting, because if the Andean tradition could be reduced to the constellations, I don't have anything to learn, and I'm not going to be interested, and vice versa, And we are trying to make it a whole. But this is something which is going to take time, and effort and commitment. And so, as you can see, we are much better now, than more gracious and polite than 2 years ago between us.
And that may just be due to the growth within ourselves of the feminine, where there's some more generosity or patience, or things don't have to be as much of a hurry.
Probably yes.
Yeah. So I think we maybe have time for two or three more minutes, and then we need to knock this off so we can wrap up.
living energies within ourselves at this time? Like what are some things that are important for us to do to open our perceptions?
Sure. Throw your TV out. Stop reading the news. Stop listening to the news, at least for a while. And then suspend some of your understandings. John Grinder, one of the developers of NLP, used to say something really beautiful. If you know how to do something, stop doing it. Begin only doing those things you do not know how to do. And rely on, open up your perceptual faculties and be informed by something beyond you. And that requires, I think, firstly, opening your mind. Secondly, opening your heart. And through an open heart, we have all the faculties of our intellectual prowess. If we don't have our heart open, we have a lot of intellectual prowess, but it's not going to be tempered. And it's not going to be informed by something beyond intellectual understanding. Bring these energies forward is to open ourselves up to this world of living energy perceptually, and most specifically grounding ourselves in the earth, connecting with life, doing tangible, real things with the earth and nature. And I'm still too abstract in my answer, but I'm pointing in a direction. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, as you remember, we are about two factors which take you to the third. Intention, perception. Intention is a key factor for us. We are not based in any physical possession or previous mental condition to have access to the living energy. For us, it's absolutely direct. Your intention is capable to drive any kind of living energies around you. And the first step for us is to make the intention, to use your will to open for you the perception of the world of living energy. Well, we were working with Saminchaku and Saiwachaku. We speak about how to use your intention. And we just told you how you need to use your intention to open your bubble, which is your energetical field, and pull down the living energy of the cosmos. Well, if you really focus on that, and you use your intention, you are going to have the perception of that phenomenon, which is the living energy. We call it kausai. The Hindu tradition call it prana. The Chinese tradition call it chi. Japanese tradition call it ki. Even the medieval Gnostic Christian tradition call it the force of the Holy Spirit. I don't care about what is the word you are going to use. But apparently this is a factor, a tangible factor of reality. And according to us, the only thing you need to do is just use your intention to have it. And if you have the perception for first time of the kausai, or the ki or chi is the same, your whole world is going to change because this perception is going to shift your consciousness. Okay? It's something which happened to you. After that, you don't need to believe us or believe somebody who's preaching you about that. After you have the perception, you are connected and immersed in the world of the living energy. After you perceive it, you are going to play with that.
And how you say play, lastly, I would say ask the field of energy questions, query them, and act on their responses. That is a form of playing with it. You intend it, you perceive it, and then consult those fields for guidance on how to live differently, to have those vital energies. And the consultation that you get there is better than you get anywhere. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, intention and perception are going to take you to something. When you check what you perceive with the information which is in your memory, you are going to have an experience.
Right.
Okay? But this experience, after having the perception of the living energy, is not going to be as your experiences of the past. Because you have a new perception, which is a point of reference which are going to help you to reprocess all the accumulated knowledge which is in your memory. And you are going to filter it. You are going to keep what is right, and you are going to release what is not useful. And I'm speaking about useful. This is the criteria. Something is useful to improve the quality of your life. Okay, keep it. Maybe it's going to be a beautiful philosophy, but it is not capable to give you or introduce tangible changes in yourself. Just drop it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm a little concerned. We have